Cool.
Awesome. What's up, Charlie? How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I'm glad to have connected. And I hope that you were running a marathon the first time around. I hope that went well.
Oh, see, here's the thing. People ran the marathon. I ran our booth at the marathon.
Oh, nice.
We're not built the same. I'm not. I actually am. Funny enough, though, I really am trying to be in good enough shape that one day I could at least run a half. I don't know about a full marathon. That'll be a little bit down the line. But as we continue to grow the company, and I do a lot of 5 and 10K runs to promote and put it out in front of run clubs and races and stuff.
Totally.
So eventually, I would like to be able to run a half marathon like this time next year. But yeah, I was at the booth. People keep asking me like, "Oh, you ran the marathon," and I partially want to say like, "Yeah, I did," but then integrity kind of comes in. I'm like, "Oh, I can't lie to these people because they're going to call me out today, and I'm not going to be able to show up and perform." But anyway, I appreciate you making the time. I know we got about 30 minutes, so I don't want to take too much of it. Before we dive into it, I'd love to hear a little bit more about Acrew Capital, what your thesis is, and then what kind of products you guys typically invest in.
Yeah, that sounds good. So in terms of Acrew, we were founded in 2019, which is when we raised our first early stage fund. It was a $250 million fund. The partners have been investing together for the better part of the decade under Aspect Ventures, and we sort of reformulated from Aspect to Acrew to basically become a more thesis-driven investment shop, and then also align some more of our social values with our working ones, which I can talk about in a second. And then a couple of years ago, we launched our fund two at 450 million, and then a growth stage fund as well, which is partially used as a continuation vehicle for our early stage team, since we like to see ourselves as long-term investors. And in terms of the thesis-driven work that we do, so we have a bunch of different thesis areas. One of them is called Financial Services Rebuilt. We have a data and security practice, and then our consumer-focused thesis, which is probably most relevant to today, is called Community Activated. And the whole genesis of that came from the thought that community drives human belonging. We really feel that online consumer networks and marketplaces improve human connectivity and then kind of drive a lot of user growth just by virtue of that experience. And so in that space, we've invested kind of across the board. We're investors in Discord, investors in Hotel Tonight, kind of crosses a span of like healthcare, community, as well as like live stream shopping, travel. And so it's a pretty broad base. And then we also kind of have an intersect with gaming, which is why I thought what you're building is really interesting. So we're investors in a couple crypto focused gaming companies, which aren't as relevant to you today, but those would be like So Rare, Doodles, Stardust. And then historically, our partners have also invested in companies like Congregate, Scopely. So we're pretty familiar with the mobile gaming space and sort of how it intersects with like a community strategy. So that's Acre overall. We're typically $1 to $15 million ticket size investors. We lead rounds at the early stage. Kind of when investments graduate into the growth side, we tend to be a little bit more participatory. And then the last thing I'll say is in terms of the social value component. So diversity is something we care a lot about at Acrew. And so we have 500 plus mid to senior level executives who come from underrepresented backgrounds in tech and venture. So that's people of color and women. And we tap into that network as a strategic hiring resource for our companies as they start to scale. And so we make board of director placements and C-suite level hiring from that pool. The whole thesis being that, the further along you get in the growth narrative, the more important like leadership diversification becomes. So they're a recruiting network and potential strategic angels. So that's Acrew. Happy to answer any questions about that.
Oh no, it's great. I did a little bit of research. I just wanted to hear it out of the mouth of the man himself. But yeah, it seems like a really aligned group with what we're doing. We might be a little bit too early based on the check size, but generally what we're doing is gamifying and using community oriented approaches to get people motivated to move every day. So I would love to dive into our deck a little bit and run through the product and our company and where we're at right now, if that's cool with you.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. So we are Cario. I like to call ourselves the Pokemon Go of cardio fitness. Now, the first question I'm going to ask for you, Charlie. How do you feel about cardio? Do you love it or do you hate it?
I used to be a runner. I'm no longer a runner, but I still do short runs. So I love it. I loved it. I have a love-hate relationship with it now.
Most people do. Most people know they should do it, but they don't love the process. And luckily, me and you are in the same boat. And then if we look at the data in the US, the numbers back up that more people are like us than those running high people. Because the thing is, 77% of Americans get below the recommended aerobic exercise daily, and 47% don't even move 30 minutes a day. The facts are cardio is boring, unengaging, and unmotivating. And when we asked over 200 different users during our user interviews before we even wrote our first line of code about what things they like about exercise and if they consider themselves consistent or inconsistent exercisers, the people on the consistent side say they do it because they have the discipline to stay healthy. Nobody wants to die of heart disease at 45. However, they don't really love the process, and they're always finding ways to try to motivate themselves to continue being consistent with it, whether that be social groupings, competitions, or just in general, finding ways to motivate themselves towards a goal. And then on the inconsistent side, that's me. We don't really have the discipline nor the motivation to do it consistently, but we find ways to trick ourselves into it by playing games like basketball, going to the gym with friends, being a part of groups, going to the club and dancing a little bit, wherever the cardio can come from. And so when we thought about how can we find a way to bring in the fun social elements that help a consistent exerciser continue to stay disciplined, but also adding in some of these different variables and factors to help make people who are inconsistent not think about how crappy cardio can be, we wondered what products existed currently that are already doing that. And the first one that popped in my mind was Pokemon Go. Now, funny enough, Pokemon Go actually still to this day tracks more miles on a monthly basis internationally than any other app in the fitness space, Strava, Nike Run Club, Map My Run, etc. And that's just for people who typically aren't athletes going around and catching Pokemon and hatching their Charizards and whatnot. And so Pokemon Go can use hatching pocket monsters on your phone to get more people to walk and run every day and cover more miles every month than apps like Strava and Nike Run Club could. Could we do that same exact style of gamification, but then layer it on top of an actual fitness app? And so the idea we had for making cardio fun was Cario, which is a outdoor movement-based community game of turf war, where the areas you walk, run, or bike through, you can claim, steal, or defend from other people in your city. So that's a lot of words. I don't know if any of them made any sense. So I think a demo is worth 1,000 of them. So let's just go into a demo. So let's say we're right here on this specific area in Austin, Texas, where I live, and now we're running for a ZFT Run Club. Now, as I simulate me running through this area, you'll be able to see that our mile pace, our distance, our calories, our splits, our pace, all gets updated. But you'll also see that we stole this area from the Cleveland Marathon. You'd be able to share this on socials, text it to your friends to let them know, hey, I claimed this area. Here's the team I claimed it for. And also give that data back to those teams that you're claiming for as a way for them to understand who's on their teams. But we can also backlink from our platform onto your platforms and use it as a way to grow brand awareness and community engagement for your group through people walking, running, or biking anywhere on an international level to this hyper-localized amount of people who are interested in cardio. Now, you still be able to come back here like any other fitness app and review any statistics or any stats that you had for any previous activity you did. And then through that, we're turning outdoor cardio into a giant game of turf war mixed in with leaderboards, in-game stores, and other real-world incentives that we have baked in with some of our partners I'll talk about a little bit later. So why gamification? Well, I already mentioned a little bit about it already. Pokemon Go domestically has 5 times the number of monthly users as an app like Strava, Nike Run Club, or Runkeeper does. And if we look at share of time spent in the app, currently Pokemon Go versus all these other ones, if we took the average individual user session across all 4, we proportionally split it up into a pie. 96% of the time spent across all 4 of these apps is being spent on Pokemon Go, which goes into data collection. It goes into monthly, weekly, and daily active usage numbers. And more importantly, it goes into getting people to want to go outside and move every day, which is the thesis of what we're trying to do, help people live a more active, healthy lifestyle. In terms of the market opportunity, we've got like our smaller markets, we've got the running app market space, we've got the global fitness app space, both valued at around $1 billion or less. But what we're actually targeting is the AR gaming space. Now, while we're not AR on the typical level of something like a Pokemon Go, where you point your phone and you look at something in an augmented way, we are basically creating a gamified map that exists adjacent to the real world. And we're using that style of gamification that you see in apps like Pokemon Go, or Zombie Run, or Pikmin Bloom, or any of these other games that Niantic and other groups have made to motivate people to run. And this market is worth $4.5 billion and growing annually at 22%. So we believe there's a strong opportunity for us there. But that's mostly on the user side. On the corporate side, we also have talked to brands like Dell, Chevron, Exxon, the University of Kentucky, and we actually just landed our first paid corporate wellness client a few days ago, actually, around white labeling this for internal corporate wellness use. If you've ever worked at a company and you got your basic step challenge or your internal game of like running a 5K and see which department has the most people run a 5K. People are doing, or companies, I should say, are doing all these different types of challenges, which less than 25% of employees actually engage with because they're pretty boring and they're not motivating for people who aren't already doing some kind of activity. However, with us, we're using gamification as a way to help people who need the extra motivation to hopefully want to go out and be more active. And with these companies spending on average $238 per employee per year, and less than 25% of the company's employees actually using what they currently have, there's a huge market for us to innovate and create new opportunities there outside of just our user play. But we are focused on user. So as of today, we launched almost 2 months ago, January the 7th this year, and we're already at 2,500 downloads in 280 cities and 50 countries. Now, what's cool about that is that we're only spending marketing dollars in Austin, New York City, and LA, which means every other city and every other country. I just got a passport like a week ago, so I ain't been to Argentina or Chile or South Africa. So people are hearing about it from word of mouth and people sharing it. And we've got over 12 countries that have 25 or more users. Taiwan actually has 373 somehow. How are they hearing about it? We're still trying to figure all that out, but it's sharing very virally already. We're also focused on launching with different groups and using that not only as a way for us making money, but also as a way for us to grow our brand without having to spend a bunch of money on marketing. I'll touch on that a little bit later, but you'll see here a bunch of different logos. We just did something with the Austin Marathon. We're doing a activation as the official community app for the Cap 10K, which is a race of 26,000 happening here in Austin in about a month. We've done stuff with IPA 10K, 3M Half Marathon, about 2 or 3 dozen different run clubs, and even groups outside of that, because we're doing stuff with Niantic, Pokemon Go's parent company, and the University of Kentucky, having their students compete against each other as they walk around campus. And we've been able to build most of these without having to pay any money, just by them having a community team and having the branding opportunity, which has saved us a ton of money on user acquisition and exposure. In terms of traction, we have 83 teams. Of those 2,500 active downloads, we have 1,800 active users. We've logged over 5,000 unique activities. These numbers were as of 2 weeks ago, so those numbers are a little bit higher now, and about 12,000 miles tracked. We also received a $150,000 grant from Pokemon Go, and we've raised about $1 million total in dilutive and non-dilutive money. So our marketing strategy, any user app needs to, and by the way, you can ask a question at any point if you would like to, because I'll keep talking as long as you want me to.
Yeah, no, I just don't. I want to make sure I'm not leapfrogging anything. So maybe go through this page on marketing, and then I'd also kind of love to understand how you're thinking through monetization as well.
Yep, and that's actually going to be the slide after this one. So our marketing strategy is working with brand influencers. So we're getting people in the running space, creating teams and inviting their friends and their followers to join. Ad campaigns focused on men and women in certain geographical areas between the ages of 18 and 45 who've already expressed interest in cardio fitness and activity. The virality cycle of I invite Charlie and Charlie invites Mindy, and then Mindy invites Susan and whatnot, which is how we've been able to grow out to those 50 countries without even promoting in those countries yet. And then real world sponsorships, where we have groups on the app that are offering free, discounted, or exclusive offers based on activities within the app. But our primary go-to-market strategy, as well as our focus for monetization, is around all of these different partners. So you can see that the app is made up of all these unique teams that we've created, and getting those groups to sign up and then invite their people to join those teams. And so instead of having to pay for individual users through an acquisition, which is going to cost between $5 to $10 per, we've actually been able to grow at an average customer acquisition cost of about $1.50 over all of the different marketing spends, based on just having people join our teams from those groups and selling them on the idea of being able to get that back end data and use it as a way to drive traffic. And through that, we've been able to grow pretty quickly. So now it goes into our next point. How do we make money? Because I'm not Mother Teresa. This is not a 501c3. We got to get paid. So how we get paid, I mentioned a little bit about the corporate wellness. We got our first paying client on that this month. On the brand partnership side, those custom teams I showed you with the functionality of having their colors, their logo, and then being able to route people off of our app onto their platforms, we actually get those groups to pay for that, between $50 to $250 a month. Right now, for most of those groups, we're doing free pilots, but we're still generating about $600 a month in revenue from groups that have paid in advance so they can get a discounted Godfather price once we start charging everybody. Now, on the user side, the app is 100% free. However, you can buy in-game items, and you can do that by buying tokens in the game. You can either earn those by owning blocks are leveling up, or you can actually use real world currency. Think of like Pokemon Go, Fortnite, and other apps, monetization strategy. And then we have the premium subscription, which would give you access to advanced analytics. It would give you the ability to create a team for you and your buddies without being one of those branded teams. And you would also get in-game currency grants every month. We also have other ideas too, like partnering with school districts. We've been talking to a couple of different school districts here, like Austin ISD. We've talked to other groups, and we're actually going to a conference in March to talk about using this with state governments as a way to motivate kids to be more active. We've also started about charging for events. We're doing some stuff at South by. We're doing some things. We're talking about students and stuff at Coachella and other groups that are free pilots now, but we'll eventually charge for. And then also all the data we'll be collecting that we can give back to health insurance companies who are looking to use those models for actuarial science on their premium prices, for urban development, on seeing where where the foot traffic is and how people would rate the experience of moving through certain parts of town, or where they should build stuff, where there's a lot of people moving but don't have a lot of places to spend money, etc. But these are our core four.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. And on the corporate wellness side of the world, I guess what is the typical, like what is the typical contract size that you would expect?
It really varies depending on the number of employees. So depending on how big of a company they are, it would really be either one of two things. It would either be a per employee, or it would be like an annual contract over a certain number of years. So for an SMB, we're targeting groups between 50 to 250 right now, because we haven't built out all the different technologies that an enterprise level group like an Oracle or a Cisco or a Dell would want. For those groups, we charge based on a tier system between $4 to $2 per employee per month. And then on the larger contracts, the largest price valuation on how much they would pay for this has been about $400,000 a year for a 4-year or a 5-year contract with the University of Kentucky, which we feel pretty confident about them wanting to actually do once we build out the tech, because they were actually one of our larger investors in our actual dilutive capital raise, because they really like the product and they think it would be really interesting to use it for their employees. And so they're a group of 60,000 employees, and they would be spending $400,000 over a 5-year period, total $2 million. And then everything else is kind of in between there based on the size of company.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense.
Awesome. In terms of our roadmap, right now we're in phase 1. We are raising our seed round. We've raised 1 million. We're looking to raise 2. That money's going into our first hires. We just brought on our first full-time employee last week. We actually were initially going to focus on beta launching in 4 cities. It grew way faster than we thought it would. Good problem to have. So we're launching that a little bit faster, and then bringing on all those brand partners I mentioned, like the Fleet Feets and the Bandit Runnings and the Under Armours and the Adidases of the world. Then in phase 2, that's when we would fully launch out the corporate wellness product. Right now, the version that people are paying for is actually just using the app for corporate wellness and then giving them access to that data, which we haven't launched for everybody else. So they're paying for the normal version of the app, basically, but we would be bringing in outside of that eventually a white label, completely separate corporate wellness product. Then that would be phase 2 of cities. That's based on demand. We're kind of rolling into that a little bit faster than we thought. We'd also start integrating into like real world races, again, moving into that faster than we thought. And then the wearable application, where now, instead of having to have your phone, because currently you need to have your phone for the app to work, you would be able to actually have a wearable like a Garmin or an Apple Watch instead. Phase 3, Series A, we're estimating right now we'd raise about $10 million. But that obviously will change over time, because these are all things that we plan for, and you plan and God laughs, as they say. But that's our plan as of today, based on the numbers and how much we think it'll take for us to grow. That will allow us to be in every single city around the country. So whether you're using it in Dallas or you're using it in Frankfurt, Kentucky, it would work the same. Working directly with insurance companies as part of their fringe benefits program, and then incorporating integrations into stationary equipment like ellipticals, treadmills, and other things, so you don't have to actually go outside to use the app.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. I know we're running up against time, so maybe could you tell me about your team?
Yep.
Before
Yep. Next slide. Yep. So in terms of our team, there's myself. My background's in marketing, business partnerships, go-to-market strategies. I was Austin 25 under 25, 40 under 40. Have prior experience with a different company I worked on with as a content creator, working with Old Spice, NBA Mobile One, which is my background on partnership development. I'm Venture for America Entrepreneurship Fellow, former SDR at Qualtrics on the sales side. And then my CTO, former senior iOS engineer at LinkedIn, also was a co-founder of another company called Playground, who he helped them raise $3.5 million for a B2B SaaS. And then on our advisor board, we have the founder of Mount My Run, former head iOS engineer for Pokemon Go, former director of innovation from Adidas Mobile Fitness, lead game designer from Zynga, a senior designer in UI UX at Strava. head of engineering at Swift and current business engineer at Meta, and then a corporate wellness consultant who's had contracts with Keller Williams, HEB, Cisco, and other groups who are advising us in all those different facets of the business. But that is us, and that's how we're helping people love cardio a little bit more. So now I'll stop talking and let you ask any other follow-on questions you may have.
No, thanks for the full walkthrough. I think it's really interesting. Like Strava probably runs into a lot of issues, like keeping people engaged for the long term. Like nothing's really bringing them back. I think there's so many like unique hooks that you guys can employ to keep people running for a longer period of time. And I think it's an admirable goal for sure. So what is the ideal investor for you? Like how can someone help off the cap table? Like who do you want for this round?
Our primary focus right now is somebody who could help us in the strategic space of gamification and health and wellness. So somebody who has connections in that space, whether they've invested in companies that have been successful, who can give us advice on monetization for free to play games, who can give us advice on retention, on acquisition strategy, who can also help us create partnerships with groups in that space, whether it be, a game that we can partner with, whether it be tactics or things that they've deployed in the past to be successful. Somebody who can offer that on the gaming side. And then on the health and wellness side, we would want somebody who has expertise and connections in that space. Somebody who can say, hey, we will put you in front of the New York Marathon, and we'll put you in front of the largest run club in New York City, and we'll put you in this different event right here where there's a whole bunch of decision makers on corporate wellness. That type of investor would be predominant.
Got it. I think that makes sense. And then kind of walking back on some of the products / market considerations, like obviously you guys start running up against some adjacent players like a Strava or like Nike Run Club, even to an extent like Pokemon Go. Obviously, there's a lot of differentiation in how you're approaching the user experience and making it more community driven, which is like a very strong hook. But I guess how do you think about like moving players over into your ecosystem? I'm assuming a lot of it's going to be driven by the community, like go to market. But like, how do you see like a hardcore Strava runner porting over, especially when there's kind of like data that they would lose out on?
Yeah, 100%. And that's been our biggest friction point so far. And so our way around that is twofold. So for one, actually, I guess it's threefold. So for one, it's making a fun experience to the point that like, even though Strava is where they have all their data, this app is just so fun that they can't just ignore it. In fact, it's so funny you mentioned that because I was literally talking to one of our users who is a diehard Strava guy. He literally runs marathons for charity. Like he runs 50 marathons a year. And so I can literally show you this to put it in perspective on like exactly how we're going about doing this. But so talk to this guy here, and he's a big Strava guy. And oh no, it's making me install something to share my screen. But he's a super big Strava guy, like I said, runs all the time. And it took us like 4 months to get him to switch over and use our app because he's just so interested in Strava. But once we got him to use it the first time, he said, dude, this is so awesome. I just run both at the same time. Because I still want to have my data in Strava, but I'm willing to literally kill my battery more by running 2 GPS at the same time just because of how cool this app is. Then in terms of the second way, beyond the first one being how fun it is, the second way is a community-oriented side. People are going to steer towards wherever the people they run with are. And if we can get the run clubs to use our platform as their community-based game and their way of integrating people into their club, eventually we can just get people to convert that way. And we can get those groups to convert from like a Strava club to ours by saying, hey, this is a cool way for you to be able to engage your audience, to track all that data, and also drive new engagement because now people can discover your brand, and you can't really do that on Strava. And a lot of those groups have been interested, like the Austin Marathon. We're partnering up hopefully with the New York Marathon, the Chicago Marathon for this exact same thing. And then about 24 run clubs across Austin, LA, and New York. And then the third way is that we're not going to make them choose eventually. So we're in the process of building an integration where now we would be able to push data from our app into Strava. So you could use our app, but then it would populate that data into Strava. So technically that can still be your central repository, but you would use ours in real time.
Yeah. I really like that approach, like partnering with the rest of the ecosystem, especially since you can technically run both apps at once. Like it makes more sense not to view it as a zero-sum game. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And it's a good approach. So I how do you think about like some of the mass activations? I know you talked about partnerships with the major races. Obviously, like looking at the Pokemon Go model, like you could have mass activation through like Pokemon Go specific events. You had shiny rare Pokemon pop up across town, driving a lot of people to come on board. Like, what do you think about outside of the partnership context as potential activations on the go to market side?
Yeah, we've been thinking about that a lot, and we're already doing very pretty much we're doing that already in a lot of ways. So South by is this week, like I mentioned. And we are actually running a competition during South by. So at South by, we're having a investor versus startup turf war. We've got 100 people signed up across the two teams, and having investors on the team investor and having startups on the team startups. And as they're walking around Austin, claiming it for that group. And we're getting sponsored prizes by a couple of different people in the startup community and the fitness community who are providing us free shoes, discounts, and whatnot for the winning team. And so we're using that as a way to activate people walking around South by. We are also doing a similar activation this month for the run clubs in Austin, because we're having a competition called Battle for the Blocks, where we have all these different groups competing to see who owns the most blocks in Austin. And we just kicked that off today. We already have 24 teams participating and 106 individual people who have already started like claiming turf as of this morning for that activation. So beyond that, we're also doing stuff with the Austin Marathon. What we did with them was saying, oh, hey, claim the race route for the Austin Marathon, where now you're running the marathon, the half marathon, 5K, whatever, and you're claiming that route for the Austin Marathon, and then we give that data back to them. And in exchange for doing that, they gave us a free booth. So we got a free booth at the expo and the finish line, a $4,000 value for free by offering that incentive. And we've got 400 downloads from that one activation. So things like that, which are very low cost, high engagement, and then we can basically repurpose that over and over again for pretty much different stuff. Even with Coachella, we've been talking to Coachella about making an artist turf war, where if you're on Team Jack Harlow or Team Harry Styles or Team Bad Bunny or Team whoever, as you're walking around the Coachella grounds, you would claim it for that team. And the artist who has the most blocks captured over that weekend would win some kind of special reward from us, and we would get that sponsored by somebody, so we wouldn't even have to pay for it. And we get the artists to A, learn about the app, B, promote it to their groups, and then C, get those users who hopefully will retain past that event and use it wherever they go.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. And then maybe tell me a little bit more about the gameplay experience. Like how often is someone able to like run the game and claim territory? Are you guys also running like fraud checks on if someone is just like straight up in a car? Like, is that something you detect for? I'm just curious about the kind of cases there.
Definitely. I love to show it to you. So we got our game map here. And so just showing you Austin. All of these are actual routes that somebody's walked, run, or biked through in the city of Austin. And like you said, we do fraud checks. So one thing you actually be able to see, because sometimes like not even just on a cheating level, people will just honestly forget that they went from walking their dog to getting in their car. So you can see here, this big stretch. I got in my car and I drove somewhere, and it detected, oh, you're in a car, and it ended it at that final point here. It's like, oh, you're moving way too fast. You're not walking, so it won't track that. So we have that based on mile pace, and we're building it out where it'll also be able to detect based on a certain type of movement. But in general, you'll be able to claim any blocks at any time for any team. So right now I'm on the team Cario team. I can see this area right here is owned by this group in Austin called Egby. So as I move through here, as I'm moving through, I can claim that area. Once I finish, it'll show the area I went through, the teams I stole from. I can manipulate this map to see relative to where I am in the city where I claimed it, or recap of my sets. You earn XP for every activity you do, and boom. Now let's say as soon as I do that, I decide I'm going to actually go on another walk, and I'm going to join the Austin Runners Club team. And now let's say, now as I'm walking through an area, instead of claiming it for Team Cario, now I'm claiming it for the Austin Run Club team. And now instead of my colors, it's their colors, their logo, the same exact experience. I'll finish that activity. I'll see a recap of the stats, team I stole from, same experience, XP. I'll be able to click on their name here, see who owns it, see who that team is. Oh, that's interesting. I'll be able to click on their information. It'll automatically take me to their website, and they can route that and change that data to be whatever they want it to be. I can still see on my profile screen all the different activities that I have done, my route, my speed, my pace. I could share that. A leaderboard to see how I stack up on my local area on blocks, globally against other people. team-wise, how I stack up against people globally and locally. I could come here and see all the different blocks that I own around the world, whether that be here in Austin, or let's say I was just in Denver not too long ago and I was using it there. I could zoom into Denver in real time and see what blocks and which teams I own blocks for there. And I'd be able to just zip around and see that. And then you can use those tokens that you earn for those blocks to buy items. And then you could use those items to increase your ability to steal turf. So now in this case, if I want to increase my attack stat, which makes it easier for me to steal blocks, for the next 10 minutes, I increase my ability to steal blocks. And that makes it easier for me to steal those blocks, but also it's on a time limit, which encourages me to move faster. And so pretty much through all that, we create this feedback loop oriented towards people moving every day. Mile pace doesn't matter. Distance doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is which blocks you move through and how often you do them.
Gotcha. And so when you talk about running some of the competitions out there, like, are you working with sponsors to kind of like pay out prizes to teams as they like capture X amount of blocks in a certain region, or how do you kind of structure the incentive model for that?
A bunch of different ways. So we can use geolocation where it's like, oh, you're in this area of town. Now you claim this block. That block is the Fleet Feet block. You can show them you own it. Now you can get 25% off of your next pair of Brooks running shoes there. Or we can make it leaderboard based where each individual team has their own leaderboard. At the end of the month, whoever is the number one person on blocks owned for the month for Brooks gets an exclusive offer through Brooks. Or we can make it straight up an activation like the Battle for the Blocks, like the South by Turf War, like Coachella, where we have a sponsor be like the title sponsor of that thing, and then they provide that reward at the end of the competition. So a lot of different ways we can do it. In some groups even want to make it a continuous thing where they have it where the link that you would find on their turf owned would go to a specific offer only for Cario. And then also those items or those tokens that we eventually have, instead of just buying in-game items, you could eventually make that where we would have 20% off of Adidas as 5,000 tokens to cash out a 20% off Adidas item opportunity too.
Gotcha. And then last question for me, because I think we're at time now.
Yeah.
I like philosophically, like I understand how the game appeals to a lot of the current Strava user base, right? There are people that already run a lot, like easily you're winning all the time. I guess but kind of with cardio, one of your long-term goals is to expand this sport to a broader base of people, make it kind of consistent. So I guess like how do you think about like the novice runner experience, when you're competing against a bunch of marathoners who are taking over large swaths of your city? Like how do you get newer runners more comfortable and like willing to come back, I guess in the face of like overwhelming odds versus some of the crazy runners out there?
Yeah, 100%. So we only have 2,500 users right now, so we're not so focused on that now. We don't have enough density of people for that problem. However, once the day comes around that we have 250,000 instead of 2,500, we will actually be segmenting the map based on novice level, intermediate, or expert. And then we also will be able to segment by a certain activity. So it'd only be walkers, it would only be bikers, it would only be runners here and there. And we'd even segment it down by team size. So let's say I'm on a team of 5. We have no chance competing against the Austin Marathon, 2,000 people. Yeah. But in that case, we could segment by skill level, we could segment by activity, and we can segment by team size.
Got it. Okay. That's really helpful. Cool. Well, those are the main questions that I had. And I guess we need to wrap up now. So thanks again, Destin, for taking the time and walking me through all this. I'm gonna download this and try it out on my run tonight.
Do you live in,
huh?
What city do you live in?
I'm in SF.
SF. Oh, word. Oh yeah, we got a lot of people in SF. Yeah, there's a guy on the red team. We're gonna need some backup to beat that guy. So join my team, please.
I will.
Yeah, please. But also, what would be the best way to follow up with you? Like, I got my deck and like some high level materials and whatnot. Would it just be best to email that over to you, or what would be the best way to follow up?
Yeah, shoot an email over to me. I guess like to the point about your round, like our tickets, like we typically invest 1 to 15, but we are flexible on the check size, and everything you've talked about today is like pretty aligned with some of the thesis work that we've done on the community side. So send materials over. I'd love to circulate it with my team regardless. And even if the round size is too small for us today, like we'd love to keep the dialogue open, especially as you start thinking about your next inflections of growth. So just send that over so we have it on record, and then I'll let you know what next steps would be in a couple of days.
That sounds great. Well, Charlie, appreciate the time. Thanks for chatting with me, and I can't wait to see your name on the map out in SF.
Yeah, let me know what your team is, and I'll join and try to make a dent in the map of your.
I'll shoot you a referral link over for the
All
team.
right, sounds good. Take
Awesome,
care.
man. See ya.
Bye.